Hey guys, welcome back. So real quick, I want to talk about Ten of Swords for a moment and how insane this upcoming crossover could be, because originally it was planned for June, like it was supposed to be a summer crossover thing, but with everything going on in the world, it then got pushed back to September, and I completely forgot about it until I got an email yesterday that was just your general Marvel Entertainment upcoming comics type of thing. But when I seen it now, like after everything throughout Dawn of X, so many ideas and light bulbs just started going off. So with that, I want to talk about what possibly to expect. And it's a lot, so let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with Jonathan Hickman's Ten of Swords being a good ways out, there's not a whole lot that we officially know about it. But from Powers of 10 and through House of X and Dawn of X, and especially Excalibur, we've not only seen a number of swords return, but also quite a few new ones as well. And with more recently, with what we've seen with Apocalypse throughout Excalibur, pursuing a mastery of mutant magic, and also the Starlit Citadel, only to find more Captain Britons there, it only leaves you to think that this is setting up something bigger. And I feel like the biggest lead that we have is the title of this event itself, because with me googling just to make sure if it was Ten of Swords or X of Swords, I had actually come to find out that Ten of Swords is a tarot card, which wouldn't be new to the tarot cards which we've seen of Rasputin, Nimrod's Tower, and Cardinal. And so now I'm gonna read a part of what I got on Biddy Tarot, which was like the top result when I looked this up. But when I was looking into this, they explained of course what the card means, and if there was any one little thing that I did understand about tarot cards is that they do have an upright and a reversed meaning, which means that whichever card you would get, depending on its orientation, the outcome could be vastly different. And for the Ten of Swords card, I want to talk about both. And with doing that, let's start with the upright. And for that, I'm just going to read what it says here. And I also got a link down below if you want to go over there and read more about it. But as it reads, for the upright Ten of Swords, the Ten of Swords marks a painful yet inevitable ending. For example, a relationship may come to an abrupt end, your job may be cut, or a contract may be broken. It is as if the ending has come out of the blue and rocked your world. You could have never expected it, but now it's happening, cutting you to the core, leaving you as if the world has crumbled in around you. You are grieving in pain of this shocking loss and wonder if you will ever find love or find work or trust again. When the Ten of Swords appears in a tarot reading, you may be the victim of another person's betrayal or deceit. You feel as if you've been stabbed in the back and are reeling from someone else's actions. And so immediately when I read this, I think about Krakoa and the separation between Krakoa and Arakko, which occurred during the Crisis Invasion when these mysterious beings showed up with a Twilight Sword, which forced Apocalypse to separate the island from its other half, Arakko, which prior to this point has been described almost like a significant other. And with Krakoa losing this significant other ages ago, you can see how this can relate to Krakoa's recent sadness and it feeling like it's lost something, whether at the hand of Apocalypse or the invaders who primarily caused this rift to begin with. But although it does appear like we've gotten a portion of this resolved in some of the issues of X-Men during Dawn of X, but when it gets to the point where we see the full measure of these invaders returning, I wouldn't be surprised if Krakoa felt the need to take less passive measures this time around. But also in the case of loss, Apocalypse can relate to this as well, especially with the feeling of this loss taking place at the fault or cause of someone else, because in his case, this separation has cost him his first set of horsemen, of whom he said were his best horsemen ever. Best horsemen ever. But with reflecting on them, he mentions that every horseman after has only paled in comparison. And much like I mentioned in the Children of Apocalypse video, within our talks of X-Men Dawn of X Volume 1, I truly feel like we've only seen the tip of the iceberg of what those horsemen were capable of, and also their children, the Summoners. But aside from this, just giving more information about the tarot card and how it relates. It even goes on to talk about betrayal and how someone may handle it. You may be hurt, you may be looking for someone to pity you, in which that part is not Apocalypse. But ultimately in the upright position, Ten of Swords is about letting go and accepting your circumstances, to where you no longer resist but you allow change to happen, even though this change causes pain, but you also understand that pain brings forth renewal, so in that case you allow this change rather than fight it. And this is definitely a double-edged sword when it comes to the resurrection process, pun intended, because at this point in Moira's 10th lifetime, to where at this point you can really think of these 10 different lifetimes being 10 different swords stabbing her in the back, and with 9 of these that have already failed, this 10th one could very possibly be the next. But on top of that, as far as the resurrection program itself, it is like the epitome of not accepting change, because naturally death is a part of life, and without it, this seemingly godhood is built upon an unnatural foundation, which was one of the biggest conflicts that Kurt and Scott discussed while witnessing the Crucible. Crucible. And I won't reiterate too much of what we talked about in that video, so I don't sound like a broken record in this one, but do keep in mind, like I mentioned, that the foreshadowing of Nightcrawler's new religion, that is very likely the same religion that the Cardinal Mutants that we'd seen in Powers of 10 1,000 years in the future, who resembled Nightcrawler, firmly believed in. But to elaborate more on the letting go and accepting circumstances, this reminded me of some of the things that we talked about over on the X-Force playlist. Like for one, the argument between Wolverine and Domino about how important it is to remember even the worst memories because these different experiences define who we are, and with that mainly how we react to them. And on the flip side, we got much of the same in Marauders, in the case of Kate Pryde, to whom with her dying breath she told Sebastian Shaw that a day will come where he will beg for her blade, which I would love to see take place in Ten of Swords, especially with the way that Kate Pryde was betrayed by Sebastian Shaw, which feeds very much into the representation of trusting someone to an extent than being stabbed in the back. But also along with this, the article goes on to say that the good news is that the Ten of Swords marks the final ordeal. No more pain will come to you from that source. The hour is darkest before dawn, and you must experience the full impact of what has happened before you can move forward and start over. Is it going to be easy? No. Will this ordeal last forever? No. Pick yourself up from the ground and reflect upon what has happened to you and why, and what you can learn from the experience. When you do this, the hurt and pain will fade, and you will soon see why this needed to happen so that you will evolve into your fullest potential. The hurt and pain that you have endured have not gone without purpose. Use the positive power within you to learn your pain and draw wisdom from defeat. And I gotta tell you, like right off the bat, it sounds like that was written by Apocalypse himself, with not only his history of wanting the best out of mutants, but also with him leading from example and making himself stronger over the years, with physically adding enhancements to his body, whether through celestial technology and even more recently magic, which potentially could set up Ten of Swords to be like the truest full developing arc of Apocalypse that we've ever seen. But on top of that, I want to also get into the reverse of the Ten of Swords, to where in this case when the card is flipped, it carries a different meaning. And I also gotta say, like even in its inverse, like for the reverse Ten of Swords, like it still fits into the narrative of what we've seen so far and how everything's been building up. But here's what it says: the Ten of Swords reverse indicates that you are combating inevitable change or ending because you are not ready to face up to what is happening. However, the more you resist, the more this situation will continue to drag on, so it's time to rip off the bandage, however painful that may be, to get this over with and start fresh. Trust that everything that is happening for a reason, though it may be difficult to understand what you are going through, know that it is leading to personal growth and regeneration in the long term. And so now getting into this part, this is where I feel like the rift is really going to take place, because the reverse Ten of Swords, it really goes against the grain of the resurrection program, and it really makes the precautions which Magneto, Moira, and Xavier had made sound like they are prolonging a future which is ultimately inevitable. And if there's any two people who know about this the most, then that's Moira, for one, who has lived all these different lives, tried things a number of different ways, only to see them all fail up to this point. And aside from her, number two would have to be Destiny, who at this point has been blacklisted from being resurrected for reasons that are only alleged at this point. But if Destiny were to return, not only would her visions change according to Charles and everyone else's more recent actions, but she would also have a much clearer vision of a number of the things she tried to warn Mystique about if she were to be alive at the present, and see further into this new future, which is a product of Moira and Charles's actions. And so now last but not least, with both your upright and reversed Ten of Swords, both dealing heavily with betrayal, you know we gotta talk about Mr. Sinister. Because if you guys remember back when we talked about Powers of 10 and House of X, like in between the panels we were given bits and pieces of this betrayal event which turned everything on its head, and it all started with Mr. Sinister. And I got that link below if you need a refresher on that, because at the time I really felt like it was something significant to do a video on, even though there wasn't like a dedicated issue talking about the betrayal event. But looking back, I'm glad I did do that video, because some good things did come from it, like the creation of Cardinal, who's really a nameless mutant, but he's just called Cardinal because that's his class. But also Rasputin, who we also got as a product of Sinister's betrayal, to where in her class, she's the product of one subject with 5 different mutant powers, which in Powers of 10, that was the limit at the time, 5, which to me is a very interesting number, being that that number is needed to even make the resurrection process possible. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Just our first in many talks of Ten of Swords, because there's a lot about this that I'm excited about. But real quick, I just want to give a shout out to all the patrons, Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can head over to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. If you want, we can continue these videos leading up to the event, and in the next one we can talk about some of these swords, like Wolverine with the Muramasa blade, which one of you guys hit me up about on Twitter, which I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But aside from that, also the Cerebro sword, like come on man. Like, I knew at the time when we first seen it that it wasn't there for nothing, especially when we found out that Charles still has the sword hanging over his bed, and even how at times he can hear it speaking to him. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.